Hi, I'm Kris Kern, clinical hypnotherapist, naturopath and weight loss specialist for Mind and Body Revival. And today I'm going to be having a rant. Listen up, because this is something that makes me really mad and it's possibly even affected you. What makes me so mad is the myriad of companies out there that will stop at nothing to sell their so-called weight loss products. You know, these shakes and bars and so forth. What's the problem here? Well, I've had several clients come in this week. One lady told me she had just spent $400 on these weight loss shakes and bars. $400. It's a lot of money. I'm always suspicious about these things, so I went online straight away and had a look at the ingredients. And I was shocked. I don't know if you understand about reading labels, but the first ingredient on a food label is always the ingredient that's in the highest quantity in that product. And the first ingredient on her protein or weight loss shake was skim milk powder. I mean, skim milk powder? You can go to the supermarket, I'm sure, and buy a can of skim milk powder for under $5. What's the problem with skim milk powder, you might be wondering? Well, firstly, for many people, milk is highly inflammatory. It triggers inflammatory chemicals to be released into the bloodstream, and as a result, it can be causing weight gain and difficulty losing it, not to mention the damage that's happening in virtually every cell of the body as those inflammatory chemicals float around in the blood. This can be happening in the brain, the joints, the blood vessels, and any other tissues in the body. Secondly, milk and dairy products can cause insulin to go up. Now, insulin is your main fat-storing hormone, and as long as insulin is high, you are not going to be burning fat because your fat cells are locked tight. The other issue with skim milk powder is that any low-fat dairy products actually increase your risk of a whole range of different cancers compared with eating normal dairy products. And dairy products overall actually do increase a risk of a whole range of different cancers. But as I said, skim milk products increase that risk even more. In that lady's product, the second and third ingredients were sugar. Sugar? I don't know if you realize that sugar is your #1 fat loss enemy. That's right. Because there's no such thing as healthy sugar. I don't care what anyone else tells you. Any sugar is going to sabotage your fat loss efforts. Because when you eat sugar and insulin goes up, remember, insulin is your main fat-storing hormone, and your fat cells will be locked tight. It doesn't matter how much more exercise you do or how much more you cut your calories. When you do that and your fat cells are locked tight, you will actually break down muscle to give you the fuel to keep going. And you're going to mess up your metabolism. Now, the subsequent ingredients on that list for that particular product all look to me like they were the ingredients for some kind of chemical experiment in a laboratory. They certainly weren't foods. There were thickeners and all sorts of other strange ingredients. Low down on the list, so in the lowest quantities, were a few vitamins and minerals. There were no quantities listed. So these were likely to be there in minute amounts. Nothing that's really going to be of true benefit to you. And just there to make the product look good. I also had a lady come in this week who brought the label in for her weight loss shake. And I have to say, this was the most shocking product I have ever seen. The first ingredient on the list was wheat protein, in brackets, gluten. Cheap, nasty gluten. You probably think, well, what's the problem with gluten? Only people who have celiac disease or maybe gut symptoms have a problem with gluten. Well, I'm here to set the record straight. You don't have to have any gut symptoms to be experiencing slow, insidious damage from the top of your head right down to the tips of your toes from eating gluten. I want to talk to you a little bit now. I'm going off track, but I want to tell you a little bit about my journey. When I started studying naturopathy about 12 years ago, I had been diagnosed with an autoimmune disease of my thyroid, and I was experiencing debilitating irritable bowel symptoms. And I was told in our student clinic that I needed to be gluten and dairy free. And I thought to myself, yeah, right, it's never going to happen. I've always said bread and cheese were my two favourite foods. I'm not prepared to give them up. But as I started studying more and more and reading more outside of my college curriculum, I found information that was linking gluten to autoimmune diseases like mine, and I went and had the test done, and it came back negative. I thought it was a little strange because I had started relating eating bread and cake and biscuits and those kinds of things with my irritable bowel symptoms, and I started cutting down, noticing that my symptoms were improving. And then about 6 years ago, I was watching a seminar on a DVD with a doctor from Brisbane who was doing his research on his PhD actually on the connection between gluten and autoimmune disease of the thyroid, which is what I had. And he wasn't looking at gluten antibodies or gluten allergy testing at all. He put all his patients on a gluten-free diet, and he was tracking their anti-thyroid antibodies to see what the level of attack against the thyroid was. And he found that it came down in all of his patients. So that convinced me that really it was time for me to get serious about going gluten-free, and I did, sort of. Occasionally I was out and I'd forget to ask if whatever I'd ordered was gluten-free, and realised when it arrived that it probably wasn't. Occasionally my partner would sneak something into a meal that wasn't gluten-free. And sometimes I'd think to myself, to hell with it, I'm just going to have a little bit of that cake. I was not having sandwiches or bread at all anymore. I hadn't done that for quite a few years actually. And it was really only a couple of times a week that I was eating gluten, and I wasn't getting any symptoms from it either. However, about 2 years ago, I was watching Dr. Tom O'Brien speak about gluten, and I realised those small amounts of gluten were actually doing my body damage, and it was time to go strictly gluten-free, which I did, much to my partner's frustration because he's the chef in our house. However, I stuck with it. He agreed to get all gluten out of our food, and after 7 weeks I had an anti-thyroid antibody test done, and my antibodies had come back down almost into the normal range. They were the lowest they had been in many, many years, at around 43, when the upper level of the normal range is about 34. They'd been up in the hundreds prior to that. So that was my proof to myself that I needed to be gluten-free for the rest of my life. I still wasn't convinced that everyone needed to be gluten-free. I thought it was just me and people like myself who had autoimmune disease. But I was wrong. In the last 6 months, I've listened to nearly 30 hours of interviews with the experts from around the world on gluten and wheat and the damage that it's causing to our health. And it has totally convinced me that none of us should be eating gluten. There is a condition called non-celiac gluten sensitivity, and you don't have to have any gut symptoms to have this problem. You can just have insidious slow damage going on in your brain or many other parts of your body. And the immunologists speaking in these interviews said, it's not a matter of if, but when it will catch up with you. When does the rate of damage exceed the rate at which your body can repair? The neurologists who I listened to speak said that if they had gone into the brain first and discovered the effects of gluten in the brain before celiac disease had been discovered, they would have called celiac disease a disease of the brain and the nervous system. There is absolutely no doubt, there is overwhelming evidence, even though you're not hearing it from other health professionals or through the media, there is overwhelming evidence that gluten and wheat are extremely damaging to your health, celiac or not. And wheat and gluten trigger inflammation that triggers your stress hormones to go up. And stress hormones keep your insulin high, keep your body in fat storing mode. So the other nasty things that you'll find in these cheap weight loss products are things like not only sugar, and usually they have several different forms of sugar, some of them names you wouldn't recognize as sugar, because sugar comes under many, many different names, possibly even a couple of hundred different names. There are all sorts of chemicals in these products that don't need to be there. Your body doesn't want them and it doesn't need them. Also, they contain quite often nasty fats, pro-inflammatory fats. And usually the forms of minerals that are found in these products are cheap and not very absorbable minerals. So please stop wasting your money on these nasty products. Don't fall for the claims that these companies make. You need to do your homework. Apart from the fact that you're pouring your money down the toilet when you buy these products, you're actually sabotaging your fat loss efforts. So stay tuned for tomorrow's video on what you need to look for in a protein powder. You see, I'm not averse to using protein powders, and I actually use one myself. But you need to know what you're looking for. And if you haven't already downloaded my free ebook, the mini version called The 5 Diet Myths That Keep You Struggling with Your Weight, just click on the link below and get a copy right now. Bye for now.